Hey guys, I'm really been looking forward to this. A conversation with J.D. Vance, the author of a terrific book, Hillbilly Elegy, that came out, I guess a couple of years ago now. I read the book and was fascinated by it, and then Debbie and I watched the Netflix movie based on the book, also called The Hillbilly Elegy, made by director Ron Howard. And the movie is pretty good. But the book is just downright outstanding, and I'm actually holding it right here in my hand, Hillbilly Elegy. The power of the book, I think, is that it's a memoir that draws you into JD's life, interesting in itself. But JD is a little bit like Rousseau. His life resonates with larger themes, and you feel like you're learning a lot about the working class, climbing out of poverty, fighting family dysfunctionality, all issues that America is wrestling with right now. So, JD, really welcome to the podcast. I'm thrilled to have you. I want to begin with a moment in your book, Hillbilly Elegy, where you are at a cocktail party at Yale Law School, and somebody comes up to you and offers you wine. And they say red or white, and I believe you reply white, and then they start talking about, well, would you rather have a Chablis or a Chardonnay? And you're like, are these people screwing with me? In other words, I really had to laugh out loud because you were an outsider to that culture. You didn't know that there were 8 different types of white wine. And so talk about that experience. Tell me what happened and how did you feel at that moment? What was really going on?
Yeah, well, as you know, Dinesh, having been in some of these environments, it's not just a sort of social test. It's actually a social test pretending to be a professional test, right? You have to sort of fit in with these people if you want to get a job. And what I was thinking to myself is, oh my God, I have no idea how to conduct myself in this environment. So they're not going to hire me, right? That was really what was going through my mind is how can I not embarrass myself so I can get the job done here and actually make sure I have gainful employment afterwards. And I think it just revealed something that's sort of really important about the different cultures that we find ourselves in. And if you come from a background like mine, I think you sort of know instinctively that a lot of what's going on in what you might call elite culture is really it's not about ability, it's not about smarts, it's not about credentials. It's really about the sort of social test of fitting in. And I kind of got a crash course at that when I went to Yale Law School, and really still something I think about today because there is just something, it's kind of funny on the one hand, but on the other hand, I think a lot of folks realize that there's sort of this whole different world behind the veil, that unless you know how to conduct yourself in that world, people are going to judge you, they're going to look down on you and so forth.
JD, the year was 1979, and I walk out of my dorm at Dartmouth. I'm a new student, and I believe it might have been convocation. I'm wearing a shirt and a sweater, and I look over the Dartmouth green, and I literally see 1,000 students in navy blue blazers. And I, like a kind of sense of shock coursed through me, and I was like, who sent out the memo on the navy blue blazer? I didn't have a navy blue blazer. And so I remembered that when I was reading your book because it is this rite of initiation. Everybody else seems to have gone to the right prep school. They seem to have had the appropriate background. They fit right in. They drop right in. And for guys like you and me, our backgrounds couldn't be more different. Mine from Mumbai, India, yours from Appalachia. But we were both outsiders in this very elite environment. And it's almost like it took us a little while to get our bearings.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And, there was a time when I felt almost resentful or regretful about that fact. I sort of felt like an outsider, and I didn't really like the fact that these people didn't really, share much in common with me. I've gotten to the point now where, I think it was Justice Clarence Thomas, actually, who once said in public remarks that sort of coming from outside of that world made him appreciate how special the world he came from was. And it always kept him grounded. I think there is something to be said that when you sort of come from that world, if you always feel comfortable in it, if you always feel entitled to those things, then you don't really appreciate, sort of how lucky you are to be able to have, some of the opportunities that you've been able to have. So I do, on the one hand, I wish folks at places like Yale Law School were more open to people like me and backgrounds like mine. But I also am sort of glad that I never really fully assimilated into that culture. I'm glad I was able to stay grounded.
That's very interesting. I want to talk about what do you think, you said how lucky you are, and I want to you to identify what you think were the lucky elements that enabled you to break out of. There are not a whole lot of guys, and not a whole lot of poor white guys from Appalachia who end up where you did. A success story, not just through education, but through your work in finance. What I want to ask is, how did you make it out of there? When you look back at your life, what do you think of the things? Because you talk about the fact, when you describe the family and kind of cultural dysfunction going on in your life, it seems like, wow, there were so many strikes against you. Your mom was a drug addict, and so the kind of family dysfunction that makes it difficult to study, some of that was also in the movie. When you look back on your life, what would you say are the 2 or 3 things that paved the way for you to climb out of a circumstance that not a whole lot of people get out of?
Yeah, I'd point to a few things. I think, first and most important is my grandma. I think that the common story from folks who come from tough backgrounds and end up able to do something with themselves, the pretty common story is they had at least one person they could really depend on. And for me, that was my grandma. And so there was definitely a lot of dysfunction in our family, but there was also a lot of love and a lot of loyalty. And I think that gave me this sense of groundedness, gave me the confidence to actually pursue my dreams. And so I think my grandma gets a ton of credit. I called her Mamaw, so folks who have read the book will recognize that character, I'm sure. The second thing I'd point to is the United States Marine Corps. I enlisted in the Marine Corps when I was 19 years old. It was 2003, right after September the 11th, right after we'd invaded Iraq. I believe I enlisted in April of 2003, and we invaded Iraq in March of 2003. But the Marine Corps really gave me this community of people who were really believed in themselves and believed that they could accomplish something together. And I think just being immersed in that culture was really powerful for me. It really set a positive example. And then the final thing is I'd have to point to my wife. I met her at Yale Law School when I, again, felt like an outsider, really didn't feel like I belonged. But, with her by my side, I've always sort of felt like I've had somebody on my team. And so even as I've navigated these really complicated worlds, I've never felt quite alone in it. So I think it's really complicated. There are probably a million different things that really made the difference for me, but those 3 definitely stand out.
I didn't serve in the Marines myself, but I am a product of a 12-year Jesuit education. These are the old-style Jesuits, and it is said of the Marines, as of the Jesuits, that their strategy is very simple. They take someone, they undermine your self-esteem. So the very opposite of what we often hear. We have to boost everybody's self-esteem, make them feel unbelievably good about themselves. But with the Marines, as with the Jesuits, the idea is we first help people to understand what fools they are, how little they know, how much they need to improve, how far they are from the standards that are truly expected. And once your self-esteem has been appropriately crushed and undermined, it is then reconstructed on a firmer foundation. Would you agree with that assessment of what the Marines are about? Because that was totally my experience of Jesuit education.
Yeah, I definitely do. And I think that, one of the things you hear in this sort of modern self-esteem focused psychobabble that's often missing is one of the things that builds self-esteem is actually going through tough experiences, being shown that even in the face of adversity, you can survive things, you can thrive in tough environments. And that's, that's what the Marine Corps did. It really does break you down and then build you back up. But in breaking you down, it gives you some self-confidence to recognize that, actually, I can take what life throws at me. And I wish that more kids, frankly, had that experience. Real adversity is what ultimately builds self-esteem. And unfortunately, too many American kids in the 21st century just don't have real adversity.